Well, today's review is of a 1973 documentary called Jimi Hendrix. It mixes some interviews with rock stars of the time, people who knew him such as girlfriends, close friends, as well as mixing in some concert footage from the Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock. Since this is the early 70s, you can kind of tell that a lot of the participants in these interviews are burnt out or are still in the process of getting burnt out on drugs. For example, this was Eric Clapton's period where he would just kind of sit in a rocking chair high on heroin all day outside of his house. And shortly thereafter this movie being made, there was a benefit concert to save Eric Clapton from his crappy lifestyle. There's definitely some good interviews in here, such as with his father Al Hendrix, who gives us some nice insight. There's some clips from his first appearance on the Dick Cavett Show. And there's some fairly informative sections with Pete Townsend or Lou Reed, for example. But when the interviews are bad, oh boy, are they a train wreck. Little Richard seems fucked up on something or other, mostly religion. Mick Jagger looks like he was just woken up. I'm actually wearing the same pajama bottoms as he is. These are from 1973. But the worst of the worst is this completely incoherent woman named Pat Hartley, whose only connection to Hendrix that I know of is being in that movie Rainbow Bridge, which was just kind of another thrown together movie put out right after he died. Yeah, there's just some bad interviews that it just becomes too much about the subject themselves. They're just talking about themselves too much, or just painting themselves much more important in the spectrum of the influence of Jimmy's life. There's definitely some good stories in here about Jimmy that are confirmed, such as he would never want to be seen while recording vocals, so he'd always put up some sort of veil in front of himself until he was done. I think the most telling thing about the movie, even more than the interviews, is just looking at Hendrix's physicality as the years go by. Only in a matter of 4 or 5 years he goes from full of life to seeming really pale and beaten down by the footage of Berkeley. But there's no complaints for me about having constant, mostly full performances of songs from random festivals. And when it comes to the editing, it could definitely get rough in places, such as when it'll cut in mid-sentence to someone talking, or the audio will cut off a few seconds before the video does at the end of the clip. Having a movie where it's just concert footage and interviews put together is fine, but there's not really a voice to this or a point of view. It doesn't really take any sort of shape or direction until about at least halfway or 2/3 of the way through, and even then it starts to contradict itself. For example, they always use all of the people who like to drone on and on about nothing quite often, but sometimes they'll use somebody really important to Jimmy and really close to him for only a few seconds or one brief clip, such as Mitch Mitchell, his longtime drummer, who's in there and discredits something that everyone else in the film says, which was that Jimi Hendrix was a naive person, which he says he was not. So which is it? Also, I don't know if you know this, but in movies you can do retakes, so the shitty interviews that have a lot of and don't go anywhere, you could, reshoot them, or just not use them at all. Also, the movie kind of ends on a down note with footage from the last major show that he played before he died, which was the Isle of Wight Festival. All the same, I think there was probably movies in this same documentary style that have been done better. So yeah, it's kind of a hodgepodge mess, and the first in a long, long line of making money off of Hendrix's corpse. But here's why the movie's important and why I chose to review it. Because this is so much better than some biopic of some guy trying to play Hendrix. This is just the God's honest truth, or maybe not even the truth half the time, but purported to be the truth. You know, it's people he knew who are still around and are still fucked up in the head. And as I've said before, seeing footage from the time is irrefutable. I mean, it's as accurate as you're going to get to depicting the time and people and places as you'll ever get. So, until further notice, stay sexy. Oh, I also might have had, I might have been doing this for a year now. Something like that, so. 1 year strong! Hopefully next year I'll have even more reviews.